Opposition leader Binyamin Netanyahu warned today the dangers that lay ahead if the world fails to act against Iran and its race to achieve nuclear power.
There's good news and bad news. The good news is that we are in an era of potential prosperity that is unimaginable in previous periods of history for humanity and for the Jewish state. It is an opportunity that beckons, and we have seized it. And even though 4 years ago we had an economy on the verge of, we were that close, but we exited it because we used the crisis to effect a major change. And the major change that is required in the era of globalization is the move towards free markets. Globalization is one big free market. The opening up of markets, the rapid flow of information, instantaneous really, the rapid transport that is now possible. It's only possible to exploit these opportunities if you yourself have an open economy. We in Israel had one of the closed economies of the developed world. And therefore we stood in one place. Even though we had technology, we could not really go very far. We produced more patents, okay? We've got more companies on the NASDAQ, you know all these things, right? Than any other country. So how come if we're so smart, how come we were on the verge of an Argentinian-style collapse? So this was a closed, high-taxed, monopolistic, bureaucratic economy. Making these reforms is hard. It's politically costly. It's not easy. I paid a price for it, and my party paid a price for it. We have the economic means to take care of Aliyah, to take care of education, to take care of the elderly, to take care of the sick, to take care of the impoverished people. We can have a free economy with a social consciousness because we can fill the pot, so to speak, with money, providing we keep liberalizing our economy. That's the real secret. So we are moving to economic independence, and economic independence means ultimately not only political independence, but the ability to take care of our needs. And that's the good news. Israel can be among the 10 wealthiest nations in the world in per capita income and a fairly large economy in its own right, because if we grow at the rate that I envision, we can grow at 6, 7, 8% a year for a decade, and we'll become an economy of about $250 billion with about $40,000 per capita income. That's something. And that enables us to realize the Zionist dream, the ingathering of the exiles and the upgrading of our society, but it also will help us secure our defense needs. Why do we need defense needs? That's the other side of the equation. That's the bad news. We're going to need it. We're going to need it because the world that is opening up that I've just described has one serious challenge. There's one huge fly in the ointment. And the force that resists the spread of freedom, freedom of information, freedom of commerce, freedom, cultural freedom, and so on, and diversity, the one force that resists it is militant Islam. Militant Islam is on the march. It is on the march from Indonesia to San Francisco, Europe in between, and of course the Middle East first. It is on the march first against Muslims and against Arabs who don't share their doctrinaire views. It's on the march against Israel as the first overtly Western position in the heart of the Middle East, but we're the first one. It is on the march in the quest to seek nuclear weapons, and that is by far the most dangerous aspect of this movement. Militant Islam survive? Will it win the day? The answer is categorically not. It cannot. All these retrograde ideologies ultimately do not produce anything for their peoples except misery. And so they're disbanded over time. But Nazism failed, and it was disbanded. And the question really is not whether it will succeed or fail, but how much destruction, how much death and destruction. And what will we pay? And in fact, the last time we had hate-filled ideology that knew no bounds in the use of force and violence, we paid an awful price because the world didn't act in time. The fact that such a fanatic ideology would acquire nuclear weapons is a danger, is a mortal threat to the state of Israel, but an enormous threat to all of mankind. Militant Islam has a penchant, a suicidal penchant, a cult of blood that we do not see in anything equivalent like that in Nazism. How many communist suicide bombers did you see? Not many, not any. But militant Islam produces battalions of them, and they smash into towers in Manhattan. They immolate themselves in buses and trains in London and so on. Smash into ships in the Yemen. There is something pathologically dangerous in this movement that would mean that if its adherents acquired nuclear weapons, we could face a danger that we have not hitherto known. And in this regard, there's a distinction between the Iranian fanatics and Hitler. Hitler first embarked on a world conflict and then sought to develop nuclear weapons. Ahmadinejad's regime is going about it in the other direction. They're first seeking to develop nuclear weapons and then setting about a world conflict. And in fact, what they do in the interim is use proxies like Hamas, Sunnis, doesn't make any difference, or the Shiite Hezbollah. They're using proxies while they arm themselves with the weapons of mass death. And Israel is merely the first target. So the most supreme task we have today is to make sure that we prevent a militant Islamic regime from acquiring nuclear weapons. I think it can be done. It can be done by a broad approach. We have basically three things we can do. We can do nothing, in which case, within 2 to 3 years at most, they'll have this weapon. We can consider and should consider the stiffest means possible, which is the military option, but that should be left as an option of last resort. And in the meantime, we can use effectively economic sanctions of divestment and the curtailment of banking activity to force the regime to stop the nuclear program, or, in fact, to have the regime itself fight for its own political survival within Iran. We should appeal to leaders, the leaders of France and Germany and Italy, and say, your companies are financing and fueling the Iranian regime's plans, including their plans for genocide, openly declared. And you have to stop that. Whatever plans we need to defend ourselves here, and we should gear up our economy to finance the needs of defense on land and sea and air for the days ahead. This is something that we can do today because we have this economic capacity. But above all, what we should do is make sure that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons.